Hey, I'm Pep, and in this video, I'm going to talk about my top 10 games that I own. Now, of course, there may be some other games that I don't own that I really enjoy, so I can't show them to you. So I'm not going to. Why don't I own those games? Lots of reasons. Maybe some of my friends already have them. Maybe they're too expensive. Gloomhaven. I haven't actually played Gloomhaven, so that's a bad example. Anyway, let's just jump right in. The games are already behind me, so let's start talking about them one at a time. Now, these aren't in any particular order, so yeah. First up, Tokaido. If you've seen me talk about my favorite games in the past, you know that Tokaido is one of them, and it still is. Though it has a simplicity to it, and the points are very easy to both gain and count up, I really like the way that the movement works. You choose where you move, and that affects where other people can move, and if you move too far ahead, it gives other people extra actions. I think it's genius, and I think in the hands of another skilled designer, that same movement mechanic could actually make an even more amazing game. And there actually is a game coming that's like that. I think it's Namiji? It's like this, but about fishing, and very cool. I suppose it makes sense for me to take this game down and show off some of the components. Now, I actually have the collector's edition, and this is so big that it won't even fit on the table that I'm filming this on. So I'm not going to show you the full thing, but this is kind of what the game looks like. And looks is a big reason for why I enjoy this game. I think it's beautiful, I think the mechanics are really interesting, and yeah. Moving on, we have Keyflower. Now, Keyflower is one of my favorites by far. If I had to actually go from 1 to 10, it would probably be up in the top 3. Again, it has very interesting mechanics. You take actions, but you can also take actions on opponents' buildings, which potentially lock them down from taking actions, but they can do the same thing with you. Your actions cost progressively more the more you want to do them. You use the different colored workers in order to bid for tiles. There's so much going on in the game, but at the same time, it doesn't feel complicated. And that's hard to pull off in a game. Now, unfortunately, this is one that I don't really get to the table all that often, but when it is on the table, it is gorgeous. If you ever wanted to play a game where you're slowly building and expanding a town and your opponents are doing the same, this is that game. And I love it. Now, another game that I've talked about quite a bit is Lords of Waterdeep. This game is close to my heart. It is a D&D based game, which is good, but the game itself is actually enjoyable. There's a lot of little mathy elements, there's good action taking, a little bit of thwarting your opponents by taking actions that they'd like to take, but it doesn't feel like it's just stabbing your opponents in the back all the time. It's really good. There's other games that do similar things. I've even picked those games up and tried them, and it just hasn't done for me exactly what Lords of Waterdeep has done. But I can never take this game off the shelf without complaining about it, because it has something that I haven't seen done quite the same way in any other game. This is the lid to the game. And no, it's not just too full that it won't fit. This is how the lid fits. The lid fits loose on here and has the little gap. Now, that means that the game is very easy to open, but that's kind of bad because the game itself has an insert. And so things get scattered very easily. The lip just gets in the way. I just don't like it. If they ever re-release this game in like a special edition or something, I really hope they don't have that lip. But as with the others, I'll show you a quick peek at what some of the innards look like. I mean, I'm going to say that about most of the games that I'm putting here, but it is beautiful. I really like the layout of the city of Waterdeep. You have all the buildings, that's where you pull the actions off of. It feels good. And I often will put all the workers out on the board so the board looks very full. And if you like D&D and board games, this is probably a good board game because it has a lot of D&D theme, and you probably recognize some of the characters, especially if you played any campaign in around Waterdeep. Next up, I guess I haven't been keeping count, but this is number 7. And that is, which one am I talking about next? Suburbia. A bit of an older game, although it recently had a re-release, like a collector's edition, which I didn't get a copy of, but I should have, because again, gorgeous. Whereas in Keyflower, you're building kind of a medievally kind of city. In Suburbia, instead, you're building a very metropolis modern city. And the way that the game works is fantastic. Basically, everything that you play, every tile that you build, where you build is important. What you already have built is important. The order of things is important. There's a little bit of take that with your opponents, because some of your buildings will affect theirs. On top of that, you have what you're buying, and you might buy it before your opponent can. Whatever. Either way, the way that the cities are built is super interesting, and I really like it. And if you take a look here, you'll see this is kind of what it looks like as the game is progressing. Your city's slowly sprawling out. And like in a lot of good games, the higher your points get, the harder and harder it is to keep gaining them. Next up, we have Tzolk'in. Now, or Tzolk'in? I never pronounced this properly. But the thing is, the other games I talked about before were city builders. But in this one, you take the role of one of the leaders of a Mayan tribe, and you can definitely tell the game has Mayan designs when you look at this. One of the best parts of this game, and probably what makes it so high on my list, is the way that the gears move and spin. And when you place an action, you essentially don't get that until later when you pull the action back. The longer you wait, the longer the gears have spun, and the more you gain from those actions. And like in a lot of good games, you also have to feed your people. Having an element like this in a game where you need to constantly have an upkeep for your workers makes you feel like the game is real, like you're actually grounded in this civilization. And for me, that's why Tzolk'in is one of my favorites. Now down to number 5, we get a little bit on the smaller scale with The Mind. Now it probably wouldn't surprise a lot of you to know that The Mind is one of my favorite games. It may be one of your favorite games as well. But I find that it's just very interesting, and I love the portability, the ease of teaching. I literally have played this while walking with someone on a trail. We just held our hands in our hands, and in like one other person's hand, I think it was my hand at the time, I held like the current pile of what we were doing. It was easy, we didn't really have any trouble doing it at all. And because the game is silent, you can even play it quite easily on a plane, a train, a bus, whatever. Bother nobody. On top of that, though sometimes it's a complaint I would have of a game like this, the fact that everybody plays it a little differently is amazing. Some people are very stoic. They don't want to use facial cues. They don't want to use, leaning back, leaning forward, stretching, all that kind of stuff. Some people embrace that to an extreme. And I think that's great because it means that the game brought out a lot of different emotions, a lot of different strategies, a lot of different ways of thinking in people. And that's a sign of a good game. Also, here is the game set up, but that's the game. There's not a lot in there, so yeah. You're just trying to get from 1 to 100. But no talking! And if you lose all your lives, you die. Just like cats. Now, number 4 is Game of Thrones, the board game. Now, I know with the most recent season of Game of Thrones completed, people aren't necessarily so happy with this IP anymore. But the thing is, the main part that I love about this game is that it's usually very hard to take a popular culture show, book series, whatever, and turn it into a game. They're getting better at it nowadays, but this is a bit of an older game. If you've never played this before, but you've played something like Risk, well, this is Risk. But it's a very different kind of Risk, in that you have some special abilities on characters, you have hidden movement. So essentially, at the start, everyone's going to put little tokens down to kind of show what they're going to do. And then they're all going to start revealing them, and they're going to go through them one by one and resolve them. And you can work together with people, give people boosts, give people little suggestions on maybe who they should be attacking. It's a bit of a lengthy game, usually taking at least 3 hours. In some cases, 6 or 7. But unlike Risk, I don't find that it's repetitive. I find that the games are interesting. Every individual game I've played of it has been quite different. And if you look at the board, you'll see that it is very Game of Thrones-esque because it is a map of Westeros. And if you enjoy Game of Thrones, there's lots of characters for you to find. You're playing as one of the houses, you might have a favorite. Personally, I like this little sword that comes with it. I've always enjoyed games like Risk, and so Game of Thrones really fills that void in a way that Risk eventually stopped doing. Now, before we get into my top 3, again, they aren't actually to my top 3, it's not in a particular order, but I do want to have some honorable mentions. And they're honorable mentions because though they are, games that you play on a table, I wouldn't exactly consider them board games. First up is Ultimate Werewolf. I love Werewolf. I have played days worth of Werewolf. Just hours on end, sitting there enjoying it. I understand why a lot of people don't like Werewolf because of the elimination, but I actually don't mind being eliminated. I like watching the game progress, and I like being able to kind of guess and see what's going on and see if I can still understand the game. And I really enjoy this. I'm really sad that a lot of other people don't. Social deduction is a really cool branch of games, but I see this less as a board game and more of something like a social activity. Next up is Magic the Gathering. I'll put some cards on the screen over while I'm talking just so you can see some things. But Magic has always been one of my favorite things because not only is there infinite customizability, not only is there infinite customization, every game you play is a little different. When you play with different people, they have different strategies, different way of playing. Whenever you play in a group with something such as Commander, that's my favorite because a lot of just interesting things will happen. There's some negotiation. Again, although it might technically be in the board game category, I don't look at it that way. I suppose it's a collectible or trading card game, but I've spent endless hours playing. I've played it online in Magic the Gathering Arena, which is free. I suggest you check it out. And I have way too many Commander decks that I don't even... That's not true. I was going to say I barely even use some of them, but I actually rotate between them. A lot of times we'll just set them up and roll dice to see which one we use. Anyway, Magic the Gathering is great. And for my last one, it is Starfinder. Now, I've always enjoyed role-playing games, usually Dungeons & Dragons. But the thing is, Starfinder, in the last few months, I've picked up playing and DMing a game, and I really love what it does. I used to like this game called Shadowrunner. And the thing is, in Shadowrunner, the game was... it's just called Shadowrun. I don't know why I'm calling it Shadowrunner. The game was kind of this quasi-futuristic technology, but a little post-apocalyptic, and you still had magic and some of the mythical races, and it was just kind of blending together. Heck, there were even dragons as president at one point. But Starfinder goes above and beyond that and brings you into space with a very big mix of magic and technology. And the blend is fantastic. It really has almost kind of like a Star Wars feel to it. And you feel like you have infinite possibilities in world building because you can literally build a new world every time you play. On top of that, a very dominant part of the game is, or can be, ship combat. And not only is ship combat completely different from regular combat in the way that people take roles and basically run the ship, but also you build and customize your ship, which means that my ship and the ship that my group is using is probably different from the ship that your group would be using. And like with Magic, there's tons of customization. Not only is there a lot of things in the core rulebook, but you can expand and get other books, such as the Character Operations Manual. This really prevents these kind of games from getting stale, in my opinion, because you just always have something new you can try. Whether you're the DM, whether you're the player, there's just a lot of things to do, and your imagination is the only limit. All right, let's jump into board games while I go through the final 3. So first up is Paladins of the West Kingdom. I recently did a review of this, 2 of them technically, but I just have to say that this is one of the best games I've played in a while. I'm really enjoying it. Probably play it again tonight. It doesn't feel like I'm going to get bored of it anytime soon, which is strange to me because the game feels a little samey. I'm kind of doing the same things each time I play, but I enjoy the way that those things work. And this is a heavy box. When you get a box this small and it's got a lot of weight to it, it really makes you feel like you're getting your money's worth, you know? I'll show you a quick glimpse of the board here, but if you're really interested in taking a look at, or just hearing me talk about the game, feel free to check out my review, which is right here. Or maybe it's there. Someday I'll learn how that works. For number 2, we're going to be looking at Custom Heroes. This is a game I have got quite a bit of play out of. If you've never played it before, I highly suggest it. It's a trick-taking game. So if you're used to playing games like Hearts and things like that with maybe your grandma, this has a very similar feeling. You could likely take this and play it with your grandma and she would just be like, this seems familiar. This is what grandmas sound like, right? But it's really cool because not only does it have the regular trick-taking element, it has card crafting. Boom, card crafting, which is something that AEG has done with a couple games. And it's really cool because you add things to cards, and once you've added them, they're permanently in that card. So whenever you go and shuffle the deck to do the next round, they're still there. You might get more abilities, you can even stack them and add multiple upgrades to a card, and it really makes for an interesting game. Now, of course, you take them all out at the end, so whenever you start fresh, but sometimes I like to go for a crazy game and leave them in there for next time. I don't suggest that, though. Okay, and now we get to talk about my number 1 favorite board game that I own, in no particular order, and that is Coup. I'm just kidding. It's not Coup. It is Twilight Imperium. Oh, this thing is heavy. Talking about heavy games, this box is massive. The game is massive. Setting it up on a table, it eats tables whole. I have yet to play on a table that was big enough that this game did not essentially take up the entire table. So I'll show you little bits of the game, but I'm not going to show you the whole thing because, again, this table would barely fit it. And by it, I mean the main board, which is hyper customizable. That's what I really love about Twilight Imperium. The space that you play in changes every time because people will draft and build it. Although people do tend to build their space in a similar way where there's a lot of dead stuff in the middle and a lot of thriving planets near themselves. But there are also a ton of different races to pick from, and all of them play fairly differently. And it plays 6 players, which is nice for a big, long game. And when I say long, I'm not exaggerating. This game will probably take you at least 5 hours, but likely much more. And that's if you don't flip the score track over and choose to play an even longer game. But that's what I love about this game. When you play it, it's not just a game, it's an experience. You set aside an entire day to sit there and play this game of galactic politics and conquest. There's plenty of trade and negotiation and just everybody trying to manipulate everyone just enough so that they can get their stuff while making sure their opponents don't get too far ahead. I don't get to play it nearly as much as I would like, but anytime that I can get this onto a table and get people playing it, I have a blast. And if you've never played it before, I highly suggest it. Though I don't suggest just going and buying it. Maybe try to find somebody you know who has the game already and play with them. Unless your group is really into like war type games that also feature a little bit of kind of exploration and tech trees and negotiation and politics, then yeah, maybe bank your money together and get this game as a group. I think you'll have a ton of fun. All right, that has been my top 10 games that I own in no particular order. Really curious to know what some of your favorite games are right now, so put them in the comment. And if you've played some of the games I've talked about before and just want to gush about how much you love them too, or If there's some that you haven't played, maybe you have some other questions about, feel free to ask. I'll probably answer you. Anyways, that's the end of the video, so bye! You know what? Jenga is really great too. I love the simplicity. Yeah, I love the simplicity. I mean, I like dexterity games anyway. Oh my god! I didn't talk about any dexterity games. What have I done? Okay, I'm gonna need like a top 5 dexterity games or something. I'll be back.